If you are a new mama, or you're about to be a new mama, you're pregnant, congratulations, by the way, you know the importance of nutrition for fueling your body, for fueling, building your baby, breast milk, all of the things. You probably Googled what are the best foods to eat postpartum, what are the best foods to eat, for pregnancy, all of those good things. You know the importance of that. But unfortunately, food has not become any less of a confusing topic as of late. We have paleo, intermittent fasting, keto, plant-based. What am I supposed to do? And unfortunately, everything's really missed the mark because we have been focusing more on trends than we have looking at your mama design and what that means in the lens of fueling your body very specifically. In my years of working with women, I love talking about food because I think that removing food fear and instead equipping you with the information that you need to feel empowered to take care of yourself and therefore your kids is going to be the simplest way, most stress-free way for making sure that you are nourished and taken care of. Let's get started. First thing I want to cover when it comes to the nourishing foundation of diet is it's really, really critical to remember that food fear, food rules, and obsessive black and white thinking around food is not nourishing. Not only does it actually physically impede your digestion, it causes a stress response in your body, but it also massively takes away your quality of life. And so when I'm going through kind of like really nourishing foods to include and how to combine your foods and all of these things that are going to equip you to be able to take care of yourself better, please resist the urge to write a list of yes foods and no foods and let that dictate how you go about your life. Because I find that a lot of us come from diet culture. I did years of yes and no ways of looking at food. Foods are good and then foods are bad. This is not that. Instead, we are going to be looking at food as how can I maximize the amount of nourishment I'm giving my body? Everything I put on my plate is intentional because I know that I need it. And so I'm trying to get enough food. I'm trying to get enough nutrients. And it's a much more abundance way of looking at food as opposed to restricting everything. This does not mean that there aren't foods that I may intentionally not have in my house or include in my diet when I'm cooking for my family. But there's a difference between choosing foods that are serving you better and being afraid of certain foods or afraid to go out to eat or afraid to have cake at a birthday party. That is not life-giving. I want you to ask yourself with your relationship with food, is my relationship with food causing me stress, right? Is this a day-to-day stressor on my mind? Because no matter what kind of philosophy you follow, if you're just taking a black and white thinking onto the next kind of diet, the next kind of diet, the next kind of diet, and then you're coming to this video and you're gonna kind of project it onto here, it's not going to serve you, right? So it's only going to cause more stress. And the last thing you need as a mama is another area of shame and stress. All right, enough of caveats. Let's get into it. Let's talk about actual food, okay? We are eating for resilient bodies. And what we're eating can hinder our body's ability to heal and recover, or it can be a massive helper for our body's resiliency and can actually be eating to lower stress, eating to combat the stress of breastfeeding or birth or pregnancy or being up 8 times a night because your kid is teething. We are wanting to focus on nutrient density, quality, and proper food preparation under the guise of our main macronutrients. We've got bioavailable protein, stable fats, and whole food sources of carbohydrates. A lot of times our health advice focuses on what you don't eat, right? A lot of us will look at a plate and be like, oh, it's healthy because it doesn't have this or whatever thing we are avoiding at the moment. If it's blank free, it's healthy, right? But that's really missing the mark. And that's not how I approach nutrition at all. It's what are you including? What are you going towards? Are you maximizing your plate with all these nourishing foods that are going to be protective and building your body up? Or is your version of healthy just what it doesn't have? So bioavailable protein sources. My favorites are going to be grass-fed, pasture-raised, healthy, happy, ruminant animals such as cows and lamb, a wild game like elk and bison and moose. Eating nose to tail, so you're not just eating certain muscle meats, but you're eating the organ meats of these animals. You're using their bones to make bone broth. This is a very ancestral way of utilizing the whole animal, right? We're not just ever eating steaks. It's like we look at the entire animal and we know that different parts of the animals contain different nutrients, different amino acid profiles that we can then utilize, and we're eating a very holistic, a more holistic view of eating the animal. Pasture-raised eggs, those egg yolks are nutrition powerhouses. They contain choline, which are vital for your first trimester. And if you can tolerate it, dairy from grass-fed animals or raw, I'm a big fan of raw, like pasture-raised dairy. It was a huge part of my healing journey. I was dairy-free for years. I'm not going to talk a lot about this right now. Wild caught fish like salmon and mackerel and cod, that's going to have a lot of iodine and selenium. Shellfish is a big one because they're very mineral rich. They're going to have zinc, they're going to have copper, they're going to have selenium, iodine. All of these are critical for your thyroid in particular, but the overall functioning of your body. These foods are going to be so rich in your fat-soluble vitamins, which are critical. They're the building blocks for your hormones, or the building blocks for your breast milk, for your baby. Like, we need stable fat-soluble vitamins in our diet. I don't think that's news to anybody, but I find that there's still some lingering things from the 90s that people are afraid of cholesterol, they're afraid of fat. No, your body needs these things, especially if you're a mama, especially if you're nursing, right? Your breast milk contains about 40 to 50% of that fat, and it's predominantly saturated fat. So we are wanting to be getting that good quality saturated fat in our diet. And one of the easiest ways to do that is the animal proteins that we are consuming. These foods are gonna give you the most bang for your buck in terms of easy to assimilate and easy to digest and like kind of get from that food those nutrients with the least amount of anti-nutrients from things like oxalates or phytic acid that we're gonna talk about a little bit later. Filling my body with easy to digest nutrients that my body doesn't have to put in extra work for, and relying on those as my main source of nourishment is critical. So for example, let's talk about vitamin A. Let's take a food like beef liver. Beef liver is amazing. It's like a multivitamin in a food. And it has high amounts of retinol, which is the preformed version of vitamin A. Vitamin A is critical, particularly for your thyroid and for your liver health. It is super important for the conversion of thyroid hormone. It's really important while you're pregnant to boost your thyroid production because your thyroid's operating at like 150 to 200% capacity. It's also a necessary nutrient for a lot of babies' development and supporting our liver health. So it's super important. When we eat animal foods, that is the only source of preformed vitamin A that we can get, which is called retinol. You can only get that from animal sources, things like beef liver, dairy, things like that. You can only get it from those sources. You can get non-preformed vitamin A, beta carotene, from things like, I'm sure you just thought carrots, right? We all know carrots have beta carotene. Sweet potatoes, things like that. I love these foods. However, I'm not relying on them as my main source of vitamin A. Why? Because not only does my body have to do a conversion to convert that into retinol, but the conversion is actually very inefficient. It's about a 12-to-1 ratio. So for the same amount of beef liver, the same amount of retinol that I'm getting from that food, I have to eat 12 times that. Like, you have to consume 12 times that to get the same amount. That's betting that your conversion, you have the cofactors, like you have enough B vitamins and you have enough copper to do that conversion. Otherwise, you might even be getting less than that. This doesn't mean that I don't like carrots. I love carrots. This doesn't mean that I don't like sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. This just means that I am very intentional about including a wide variety of healthy, well-raised animal sources, especially for my protein, because they are giving me those easy to digest, nutrient-rich sources of protein and fat. Carbs. I love carbs. I grew up in the 90s, okay, I had a mom that they did the low carb, they did all the things, but I am here to tell you that your body loves carbs. If you are a mama, your body loves carbs, okay? You are pregnant, you are nursing, you are running around babies, your body needs carbs. Glucose is our most preferred energy source in the body on a cellular level. My favorite source of carbs are gonna be the ones that are giving us a ton of minerals, okay? And the ones that are properly prepared. I'm diving into minerals on my next Nourishing Foundation series video. It literally is so important for moms that it needs an entire other video on its own. So if you want to know when that comes out, subscribe and get your notifications turned on, and you will be the first to find out when I finish that and have the next video in the series. I'm very excited about that. But for now, I'm going to be focusing on mineral-rich whole food carb sources. And so my favorites are like fruits and roots. When I was pregnant, oh my gosh, I was like a fruit machine. I ate so much fruit. Anyone else? Any other pregnant moms out there like crave fruit like no one else? And this is purposeful. This isn't just because, you know, fruit is yummy, even though it is. Your body, especially when you're pregnant, especially later pregnant, you're using that fructose in high amounts. You're using that sugar. Your body needs it. It is one of the easiest fuels that you need in rapid amounts for growing that baby. And so when you like fruit, when you have a taste for fruit, that is an amazing thing. fruits, roots, root vegetables like starchy squashes. Fall squashes are my favorite. Potatoes. I love maple syrup and raw honey. I actually use those in my labor aid mixed drink that I used when I was pregnant, and then I drank a ton of it while I was in labor to replenish, and then newly postpartum, and I'll be sharing that recipe in the minerals video. And then grains. When we look at grains, we just want to make sure that we are properly soaking and preparing those grains. Mainstream likes to label black and white. I've already mentioned this, but they'll be like, gluten is the devil and grains are terrible. It's just like, calm down. When we're looking at traditionally how food was prepared, which is a big kicker, if you want to learn more about nutrition, you want to learn more about, what is going to serve your body, take a look at your tradition, how, generations that have come before you have prepared these foods. When we're looking at grain, when we're looking at bread, it was homemade sourdough. If they were making rice and beans, they were soaking them beforehand to make them easier to digest. This is seen in pretty much all cultures around the world. And we've lost that in the United States, but that is going to allow your body to better assimilate those carbs. And so a perfect example is my husband doesn't do well with bread. He doesn't do well with, honestly, gluten in general. When I started making homemade sourdough, I used organic flours, so I knew that it wasn't sprayed with glyphosate, and I started making it because I wanted to run an experiment and see if he could have little bits and pieces of it. Years later into my sourdough experiment, and he regularly enjoys my sourdough with no issues. Now, if he were to go to the store and get a loaf of, Wonder Bread, he would immediately feel exhausted, brain foggy. His body can't process it. Ask yourself, how is this food prepared? What about the crop? What kind of crop is it? Was it sprayed? A lot of these things go into how your body's able to tolerate that food. And I'm a big fan of allowing the food freedom to enjoy a wide variety of foods, not just because I think it allows you a lot of nutrients, but I also just think it's more fun. And I just make sure that I'm properly preparing those foods so that my body can utilize them and I use them as my carb source. I will say that my focus does tend to be on mineral-rich foods. So for example, I'm not having sourdough at every single meal in the day, not because sourdough is bad, but because it's not as mineral rich as things like fruit, as things like root vegetables, like having beets and starchy, fall squash, because I'm nursing. And so my high priority is getting a ton of potassium and other minerals. And so when I'm looking at a plate, I'm looking at, how many minerals can I get in on this plate? And so that's really what my focus is. I also love green veggies. They're not technically, they're very, very low in carbohydrates, but I'm going to put them under this section. I just prefer to cook them down so that you're kind of reducing the amount of anti-nutrients, things like oxalates, things that are hard for our body to digest. You're breaking that cellulose down. And so, putting them in soups or really cooking them for long periods of time. A lot of us will do better digesting not a lot of raw cellulose-rich green vegetables, but instead cooking them so that we can digest them easier and get the nutrients from them. Fats. This is a fun one. I'm going to ask you before I talk about fats to just kind of let go about all your preconceived notion about diet rules and what mainstream nutrition advice is. Notice how I'm using a lot of air quotes. Stable fats is big. Emphasis on the stable. Now, why is the stability of fats so important when we're considering the fats that we want to be cooking with and consuming? So when you look at something like saturated fats, right, they're called saturated fats because they are saturated with hydrogen atoms versus polyunsaturated fats, things like sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, things like that. They are polyunsaturated, meaning many unsaturated, because of their missing hydrogen atoms and their double carbon bonds. So this basically means that they are much more prone to oxidizing. They're unstable, right? They're much more prone to oxidizing in the body through a process called lipid peroxidation. It's just a fancy way of saying that they oxidize in the body when they encounter heat and light. Human bodies, we are warm, right? A healthy human body is about 98 degrees, which means that we are warm. And so, not to mention, we go into the sunlight. So we are light and heat. That is what human bodies use to thrive. And so this combined with an unstable fat molecule can usually cause oxidation. And this can be problematic for a couple main reasons. These circulating free fatty acids actually interfere with our body's ability to use glucose. Okay, so if you are someone who has a history of PCOS, if you are someone who's told that you're insulin resistant or you have blood sugar issues, almost always you're gonna get the advice to cut carbs, go low carb, etc. But no one's talking about the fact that the fats that you're consuming is going to dictate your body's ability to use that glucose. And a lot of us don't realize that when we're eating out, or honestly, in a lot of products, the majority of things are cooked with or include polyunsaturated fatty acids. I was dairy-free for 10 years. I was having nut milk, ice cream, and almond milk, and nut cheeses, and everything I was replacing with nuts, which nuts are technically a polyunsaturated fat. This does not mean that I don't eat nuts, but the amount that I was consuming was in a proportion I was not even aware of. And I was having issues with insulin resistance. I didn't realize that all of these foods I was consuming, because I was dairy free and they were all polyunsaturated fats because they were all, formed out of nuts, or I was baking, I was paleo, so I was baking with nuts and I was oxidizing those fats. I was consuming so many of them, was interfering with my body's ability to use that glucose. And when I went on my journey of introducing dairy back into my diet, kind of moving away from a lot of those nut-based products and only enjoying nuts like in their whole food form, not like baking with them or doing other things with them, my insulin resistance completely radically did a 360. The second reason why these free fatty acids can become kind of problematic is that they can be estrogenic. Endocrinologist Dr. Raymond Peat actually did a lot of research around this area, and he found that PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fats, have a very estrogenic effect in the body, particularly when it comes to fat metabolism and cell replication, which are two of the big jobs of estrogen. A lot of us are already struggling with estrogen dominance for a variety of reasons and low progesterone. This can affect fertility, it can affect milk supply, it can affect PMS, it can affect our risk for certain estrogenic cancers like breast cancer, ovarian cancer, things like that. So we want to make sure that we have a proper ratio of estrogen to progesterone. If we're consuming high amounts of polyunsaturated fats, it can be driving up estrogen, which will be downgrading our progesterone, can present a lot of problems. So this is also something to keep in mind if you are struggling with hormonal issues like period pain, really bad PMS, late ovulation, fertility issues. This is a part of the puzzle. Polyunsaturated fats are naturally found in a lot of things. They're naturally found in trace amounts in dairy, and they're found in pasture-raised pork. I don't avoid the plague polyunsaturated fats, but something I'm very mindful of is them not in the ratio of what they're found in nature. So I personally cook with saturated fats, my favorite being butter and tallow and ghee, coconut oil. These are going to be amazing because they're going to give you that cholesterol, which is the building blocks of your hormones. But also, all my nursing mamas, attention, ideally our breast milk is going to contain anywhere between 40 to 60% of fat. That's a lot of fat. It's also going to be containing about 6 times the amount of cholesterol than most adults are averagely intaking. Okay, so their little bodies need that much fat. It helps them break down the protein in the milk, and it's also delivering the building blocks of everything that they're building as they're growing very quickly and setting their hormonal life off on a healthy start. And so our breast milk is not fixed completely. What I mean by that is there are certain things in breast milk that are fixed that your body will pull from your stores no matter what, but there are other things that what we eat will decide the certain composition of our breast milk. And so we want to be giving our bodies exactly what it needs to contain really fat-rich, cholesterol-rich, nutrient-dense breast milk to our baby, but also have enough left over for us as mamas, right? Because we can't run on nothing, and our body's going to be taking from our stores to make breast milk, and we still need nutrients for ourselves to do basic daily activities, to heal from birth, to recover, to sleep well, all of those beautiful, wonderful things that we need to do. Okay, next. The big questions of how much, how often. I do not believe in calorie maximums for new mamas. I'm actually not a fan of them in general, but that's another video for another time. Your body needs a lot of fuel, a lot of fuel. And there are a lot of dangers of undereating. Some of the biggest ones include thyroid dysfunction, blood sugar imbalance, tanking your fertility, really crashing your luteal phase, which is the second phase of your cycle, making it very short, meaning your progesterone is very low, having very low sex hormone levels, tanked sex drive, skin issues, losing your hair, etc. All of these things can come about from not eating enough. So if there's one thing you take away from this video, let it be that what you are nourishing your body with, the foods you're choosing, is obviously important, right? It's the building blocks for all the things we're doing. But eating enough is just as critical. When we undereat, our body has to exert massive amounts of stress hormones in order to compensate for the stress of not eating enough. Okay, so this means skipping meals, like not eating breakfast soon enough after you wake up. This means going hours and hours in between meals. When our body is doing this, it's very catabolic on our body, meaning that it will literally start to eat our own tissues, muscles, and fat in order to get fuel that it needs to do things, especially if you are pregnant or nursing, okay? These are not times to be restricting your calories at all. Stop. Listen. I know it's hard. I know it's hard when your body has changed during pregnancy and you're newly postpartum and you immediately feel the temptation to restrict your calories or to start exercising before you're ready and saying, I'm going to get my old body back. I know the temptation is strong. I'm not shaming you for it. I have felt it. It is strong. Now is not the time to be dieting, to be restricting your calories. You are in a hyper-vigilant state right now. The fact that you have carried a baby for 9 months, you've given birth, you are potentially breastfeeding that baby, which is a massive caloric demand, not to mention your nutrient stores are being depleted very, very quickly. Our main priority in nourishing you, new mama, is to be filling, is to be nourishing, and is to be including all these foods. Before pregnancy, just like to maintain basic function, you're looking at about at least 2,000 calories. You're looking at about 2,200 calories. Breastfeeding adds anywhere between 600 to 900 calories to that. And then any activity is going to add more caloric demands to that. So just for me personally, I'm looking at close to 3,000 calories on any given day, depending on my activity level, depending on how much I nurse, etc. There's obviously variability. And I personally don't track. But that's just to give you an idea of we need a lot of food. We need a lot of food. So you can imagine how difficult it is to get your nutrient demands in if you are cutting calories, if you're skipping meals, or if you're trying to restrict in any way, shape, or form. So everything I talked about with the nourishing foods to include is very vital. The other component to this is making sure that you are eating enough regularly throughout the day and not going too long without eating. This means eating breakfast soon within waking up, eating every 2 to 3 hours, 2 to 4 hours, depending on how your body is. Pay attention to how you feel. If you feel like you have a crash all of a sudden in the middle of the day, you're like, I don't know why I'm so tired. I don't know why I'm so tired. Eat a snack. Eat a snack. Eat. The next thing is the how of eating. And when I say how, what I mean is macro combining. Something that's also really, really critically important is that we are keeping our blood sugar stable for pretty much one of the same reasons that we don't want to undereat, which is that we don't want to send our body into a stress response where it has to put out high amounts of cortisol to stabilize our blood sugar and to catabolize any of our tissue in order to give us fuel. Okay, we want to be intaking our fuel. We do not want to be breaking down and breaking down, catabolizing our body for fuel, okay? And so one of the ways that we can do that in making sure our blood sugar is stable is making sure that we are always pairing carbs and protein together. Now, fat's usually in there. Like if you're having an animal source of protein, like meat, there's usually fat in there, and that's why I don't say fat, but you do want to eat fat, right? You want to have fat, protein, and carbs all together. And that is to make sure that we are keeping our blood sugar constant. It's going to be lovely for our progesterone. It's going to be lovely for our energy and our sleep and our hormone balance. And so when you're eating, when you're making snacks, always think of those things together. It is going to serve your mama body well, protect your liver, protect your thyroid, and protect your hormones. The last thing I'm going to say in this mammoth of a video is to go slow if you're implementing changes. Maybe you are listening to this and you're like, wow, I have been under eating. I haven't been eating enough nutrient-dense foods. I want to take care of myself. I don't feel good. I don't have energy. I want to nourish my body. I want to fuel my body. And then you just start hamming. You just start going crazy. You're like, I'm going to eat 1,000 more calories. I'm going to fuel my body. I'm going to do it. Go slow. The body doesn't like extremes. It's one of the reasons why it doesn't like really extreme diets, right? It doesn't like when we all of a sudden cut out carbs. Your body doesn't like extremes. And even if you know that you need to get to a place where you're eating a lot more because you're, let's say, for example, you're severely under eating, don't do it in a day. Take some changes, take some things you want to implement, whether it's some new foods. Maybe I want to start eating organ meats. Maybe I want to add a snack in during the day. Start implementing changes slowly and watch your body make progress. Like your body is doing incredible things, providing for yourself and for your family. It has carried a baby, it has nursed babies, it is chasing after babies. Like, it is amazing what it will do on very little nourishment, because it is that prone to survival and it is that strong. But we want to come alongside, we want to care for our body, and we want to say, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to support you. I'm not going to leave your needs on the back burner, even though it's easier to do so. Do it slowly, do it consistently. You will be shocked at the things that you see and the healing that takes place. Woo! Okay, that was a lot of information. Nourishing your body properly, it matters not just for your body, but for your mind, for your soul. Like, mommy, you're worth taking care of. And we show up better for others when we ourselves are better taken care of. This is the first installment of my Nourishing Foundation series. I'm really, really excited about what's to come. Comment below what your key takeaways were from this video. I'd love to see you and chat. You are so loved. I make new videos every week on all things intentional, holistic nourishment with your mama design in mind. Thank you for stopping by.